So the doctors comment that you can't learn new things, balderdash. And I remember there's a great online resource by, his name is Dr. Glenn Johnson. He wrote something called the TBI Guide. And he said, never in my clinical experience have I seen anybody ever get back to 100%. Some people may go, oh my God, that's terrible. My attitude is, okay, I'm going to get back to as close as I can to 100%. And if I look back in the rear view mirror of my life today, a lot of things that have come to pass, I'm at 150% of where I would have been.
I'm Jamie Mo Crazy, and you're listening to Life Gets Mo Crazy, where we'll hear from people who either been through a trauma or helped someone else through. Listen and learn strategies you can implement in your life, so when a metaphorical avalanche slides you down the mountain of life, you can climb an alternative peak with the best view. I'm here today with David Grant, whose journey began in 2010 when he was cycling along and a devastating accident caused him to have broken bones and a brain injury that repurposed his life in a way he never foresee it happening. And so we are here to chat and talk about how to rebuild identity after brain injury and find new things and climb great alternative peaks. So David, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Jamie. It's great to be with you here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And something you actually mentioned right before we started this was I was speaking at the Maine conference this past fall for the Brain Injury Association of Maine. And that was the first time you ever spoke. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it was about 2 years after my injury, and I received an invitation to speak at the conference in a keynote capacity. At the time, it was the scariest thing I had ever done in my life. And I stood there in front of the same crowd that you were in front of recently and bared my soul. And that kind of opened the door to the advocacy work that continues to this day. So, quite an experience.
Yeah. And so let's go back to 2010. So you were cycling along the road and you had an accident. Take me through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It predates that. Back in 2007, I was diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. I was weighing in at a healthy 275 pounds. Completely living a lifestyle that was not good for longevity. And my primary care at the time said, you better lose some weight or you're going to lose your feet, meaning diabetes will take its toll. And I'm hardwired toward optimism, Jane. I'm hard to keep down. And while some may have been devastated with that news, I used it as an opportunity to rebuild my life as an endurance athlete. I got on a bike again and started biking daily for the first few years after that diagnosis. My typical day was 2 hours, 30 miles. I absolutely love, and to this day, love being out on a bike. Just the freedom of being outdoors, of being in control, just the adrenaline that comes with taking care of me. And I left on a November day expecting just a regular, typical 2-hour bike ride. And life is funny. You don't really think about, you think about things that might happen in the future as part of the normal progression of life, but it's the things that come to you out of left field that really test your resilience and test what you're made of. And I was at mile 17 on a 30-mile anticipated drive and ride, and pulled into an intersection that I was intimately familiar with. Stop sign on my side. I looked to the left, I was clear. I looked to the right, I was clear. I wear the clip-in shoes, gave it a push, and the next thing I know, I was airborne.
Oh.
A 16-year-old, very newly licensed driver T-boned me full on.
Oh no!
It wasn't my best day. But if I fast forward to today, it was a necessity for me to have the life that I have today. And I'm fortunate to have survived. But yeah, it was, who expects to get up in the morning and say, you know what, I think by the time today is done, I'll end up in a nearby trauma center. And professionals unsure whether I'll even live through the day. So yeah, he T-boned me. There's some speculation that because of the time of day, he was driving into a fully setting sun and was blinded. And the net result was broken bones, traumatic brain injury. I still live with egregious PTSD, and all of us in the club that you and I are in. If I say describe that day, we never have to say what day. There's one day that's pivotal where you have life before and life after. Yours was your accident, subsequent injury, and mine was meeting DJ in a wreck of broken glass and twisted steel.
And what did you remember of that? Did you remember the whole experience?
Most of it, unfortunately. And I found over the years, since I've used my life as an example of how you can overcome and coexist with challenges that many of us face. Those who have a more in-depth recall of whatever the traumatic event or event is are more likely to have PTSD. And that's been the case with me. I recently got back into therapy for that. But yeah, I remember flying through the air, looking down at the pavement underneath me. And at the risk of being too blunt, my thought at the time was, wow, it's really going to suck when I hit the ground. And I didn't know that I had lost consciousness. I didn't find out until a year later. I thought I was awake through it all, but when I was at a therapist appointment a year later, he asked me to describe, like you just did, what happened. And I recall opening my eyes, and there were a crowd of people around me. And his comment was, do you think they just materialized? And I had an aha moment. Wow, I was down for the count, totally out of it.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed to have been struck about one block from our main fire department here in a small town in Hampshire. They shut down Main Street. First responders walked over, and they got me in an ambulance and whisked me to a trauma center across state lines. So yeah, I remember it in exquisite and at times uncomfortable detail.
You have a good point that the more you remember your traumas and what you are experiencing before your traumas, there's more and more research that's going into how that affects your PTSD. Because I actually don't have any PTSD. And it's interesting because I also don't remember 6 weeks of my life. And before my accident, I was competing at World Tour Finals in beautiful Whistler and super happy. And so until literally nanoseconds before I hit the ground, I didn't even know I was going to fall. And then as a professional skier, you fall a lot. So probably until it was like happening, I didn't realize that it was a bad accident. Versus there's more and more research that people at war, when they have traumatic brain injuries, and for the people at war, it can come from impact traumatic brain injuries and also from the noise of the guns and the bombs around shake their head. And since they're in so much fear prior to their trauma experience, and they usually remember most or all of it, that leads to way more PTSD to overcome. I mean, I had my own things. I had my own sliding towards depression that I got out of when my life changed and I had to rebuild my identity. So there was emotional struggles that happened that I had to overcome, but I didn't really ever have PTSD. And there's more and more research that shows that's because I don't remember any of it.
Yeah, memory challenges are interesting within the brain injury community. I lost, my injury was on November 11, 2010, and I lost pretty much all memory of the entire year of 2011 and a lot of 2012. I take a lot of pictures with my phone, and I can go through my Google Photos and see that I was at different places and different times. but no memory. It's almost like looking at pictures of somebody else. It's very surrealistic.
Yeah, it was interesting because my memory, when I woke up in the hospital, one, I didn't think I was in a hospital, and then two, I didn't understand at all what had happened to me. And so I didn't know at that time any of my history as well. So I didn't know any of the life that I used to be living. And there was pictures all over my hospital, and I even had a hammock. And my mom was living in the hospital with me. I originally went to Vancouver General Hospital, and then I was airlifted to Intermountain Medical Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I remember, actually, I don't remember. I've been told the story multiple times that I was looking at these pictures and hearing stories about who they were and what was happening. And I was like, wow, Jamie has so many really good friends and lives a really cool life. That's so awesome. And my mom was like, well, that's you. You are Jamie. They're your friends. And I was like, these are my friends? Really? Wow. They're such cool people.
And herein lies the miracle. I'm cutting you off. In your life, is you're able to look back on it and smile at the memory, embrace the memories, see it for the joyousness that it is. I've been very active in the brain injury community for a lot of years, and not everybody gets to that point. I lost the ability to speak in about 3 months after my injury. Couldn't put 3 or 4 words together, horrible aphasia, and I speak for a living. I'm a communicator by nature, and my wife and I had a lot of laughs. I don't know if you ever had trouble with aphasia or misplacing words or using the wrong words. But I was almost comical to take out in public. We look back on it now, and even today when I'm tired, it can still creep in, but we do a lot of laughing. So you know what? Good for you for getting to that point in your own life where it's just part of it is what it is, and you've accepted it and you move forward.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the biggest things that help your recovery. Laughter, finding humor in your situations. When I was going through my recovery, I went through stages where I failed the first lesson in Rosetta Stone in English, which is a language learning app, in English multiple times because I couldn't really do anything. But instead of thinking how depressing it was, just turning it into humorous and seeing the joy and light of different things, which brings us to one of the things you mentioned that is a good point to talk about, is that realizing that you have an alternative peak to climb, because many people don't know that they can climb alternative peaks. And that's something that a lot of brain injury survivors who have had recoveries where they are happy with their lives and content, they want to share that message so much that yes, maybe things will have permanently changed. Most people will have a completely different lifestyle. However, once you have kids, you have a different lifestyle as well. So things happen. But since we're all alive, we can climb an alternative peak. And even if we have short-term memory, and I actually am working with some different individuals with Mo Crazy Strong Foundation who've had brain injuries. And one of them, he has pretty visible disability. And he still is traveling, going to concerts, raising money and awareness. It's amazing. So you can climb an alternative peak.
The piece, bravo. So the big piece for me is, and I kind of give a lot of thought to the concept of alternative peaks, and I love it. The big thing for me was identifying that there was an alternative peak or an alternative path in my life that was worthwhile. Mm-hmm. I went in for what's called neuropsych testing. You have to relearn English. I went in about a year. I'm a data guy, and I wanted to find out at 1 year out, where am I? And my intent at the time was to say, I'm going to get a baseline and then go back for neuropsych testing every year to gauge my improvement, because I fully expected to improve, even though early doctors said you probably won't. So I went in for neuropsych testing, and it was a couple of days of grueling. I don't know if you've been through it. It was exhausting. And my wife, Sarah, and I came to the doctor's office for what we call the Great Reveal. And we walked in, and he was very stoic and clearly it wasn't going to be a good day for him. And he said, here are the results. You score in the bottom 5% based on age and gender for verbal recall. And you score at the bottom 5% based on age and gender for complex problem solving. And he said, do not try to learn anything new because you'll only get frustrated. And I said, okay, here's our starting point. Can we schedule an appointment for a year? And he said, there's no need to, David. The data shows that your recovery ends at a year, and any gains will be minuscule at best. And at that time, life was really, really hard for my wife and I. Had a very dramatic personality shift. A lot of family had backed out. They weren't quite how to reconcile new David with old David. So things weren't, PTSD nights were 12, 14, 15 a month. We were not in good shape. And to have a white-coated doctor say, it's not going to get any better, was devastating news for us. We walked out of his office, not particularly happy, but I tend to be defiant. And if you tell me I can't do something, I'll prove that you're wrong. And I sat on it for a couple of days. And again, my brain injury candor comes out at times as crassness. But it was, screw you. You know what? That may be your experience of most. But I'm not most. I'm highly competitive. And I said, go ahead.
Just to interrupt you, it makes me so angry because for years and years and years, the medical understanding was that neuroplasticity only happened in the cortical stages of development, which are the first 2 years of life, and only happened maximum 2 years after recovery. And I have spoken with individuals who 2 years after recovery were not speaking and not walking. And I went river rafting with them because now, 25 years later, they can talk and go down a river on a raft. And it just gets me so angry. And it's one of the reasons to raise awareness because my older sister was a doctor. I think very highly of doctors, but if somebody who is really intelligent and has gone through so much education is telling you can't, most people will listen to them, and they are getting ceilings put on them that they don't need to be having.
Here's the good news. I'm a writer, and I love to write. That's another door that opened after my injury. The doctors that I saw early on, I fondly call old guys in long white coats. No disrespect to anybody in the medical profession, but they were pulling on college educations that they had. The information that they were pulling from was literally decades old. So they're going back, pulling out information that you and I and others like us know is antiquated. I've had the opportunity over the years to present and speak to groups of nursing students, to people in the healthcare industry. And the good news is that entire generation of healthcare professionals with the old knowledge is going to acquiesce. They're going to sunset out of the system. And the younger professionals that are growing into their careers now are exposed to messages that people like you and I and others are sharing, that recovery doesn't end in a year. The work that I'm now in year 14. I work on a 3/4 time basis. I'm a web developer. I develop internet marketing initiatives. These are the things that pay the bills. They require an analysis of complex data sets. These are things that I never did in my life prior to injury. So the doctor's comment that you can't learn new things, balderdash. And again, like you, I've seen countless others who were given those ceilings who said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And I remember there's a great online resource by a doctor named his name is Dr. Glenn Johnson. He wrote something called the TBI Guide. And if you Google TBI Guide, you'll find it as the top match. And he had decades of experience and clinical experience of brain injured folks. And he said, never in my clinical experience have I seen anybody ever get back to 100%. Some people may go, oh my God, that's terrible. My attitude is, okay, I'm going to get back to as close as I can to 100%. And if I look back in the rearview mirror of my life today, a lot of things that have come to pass, I'm at 150% of where I would have been. So, yeah, I've got lingering challenges. I've got memory challenges. I get a little neuro-tired at the end of the day. But there were other things that never would have come to pass had it not been for my injury. Go ahead.
Well, that's interesting to say that no one can get back to 100% and to quantify it at 100%, because the truth is we all have trillions of synaptic connections, and nobody, not even Einstein, comes close to using all of them. So yes, you and I have some traumatic brain injury um, that has caused us to have severs in our brain pathways, and we've had to build new brain pathways and do things. But it's hard to really quantify that no one has got back to 100%, because I was a professional skier prior to my brain injury. I traveled the world. Now I travel the world with my documentary. It's won multiple awards, audience choice. I just came back from Europe skiing in the Alps, and I don't think you can tell me that my life is not 100% how I want it to be. Like, I'm not sure if I would have the husband that I do right now if I hadn't had that shift and had to rebuild our lives together. We met after my brain injury. But we met after my brain injury and I built that life. So my point is that whether you do or don't get back to 100%, statistic number wise, you can definitely get back, like you were saying, to 100% life,
In-
enjoying your life.
Interestingly, I sat as a two-term member for the board member for the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire. Great experience, nice professionals out there doing nice things to support the brain injury community. And we had a member that came up for about one term from Walter Reed, and I was talking about how my own recovery exceeded virtually every expectation that the professional community put on me. And to kind of spin the clock back, I get on a bike again 3 or 4 months after my injury. And for me, it was neurofatigue at 2 o'clock meant that I couldn't do anything, but I still had the physical endurance. And candidly, I had nothing better to do. So I went out on the road for a couple hours and hardcore cardio. And my mindset at the time was healthy body speeds to healing of a damaged brain. So that's where I was at. And I talked to the doctor that was part of our local board, and she said, "You don't really realize what you did." And I said, "Educate me. I'm a sponge. Teach me." And she said, "There's a human enzyme called brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF. BDNF is produced by the body, and it's been shown in clinical data to increase neurogenesis, the development of new brain cells, by like 300%. And they've done studies and found that the sweet spot to increase your own BDNF is 45 minutes of cardio 3 times a week. And I'm out there pushing 2 hours a day." And she said, basically what you did is you set your body up through like internal miracle growth to push your body into hyper healing mode. And I'm still, an hour of cardio every day without fail. And I'm still a believer that we can do things that set the table for healing that exceeds what others will think, but also to find ways to bring joy into our lives. And I'm relegated in the winter in New Hampshire to being on the stationary. I watch a lot of live music, live concerts on my tablet down in my exercise room. Once the weather gets nice, put me outside. I'm out there seeing deer and fox and out in the rural roads in New Hampshire. Just absolutely loving it. And to circle back to your point, loving it more than I did before my injury, because I have a deeper appreciation for so much that I used to take for granted.
Yeah. And the appreciation can definitely be key. I love New Hampshire. I actually lived in Waterville Valley, New Hampshire for the school years. I'm starting doing long weekends, up for the whole school year for about a decade of my life when I was a teenager. And I loved it. It's so beautiful, all the different seasons. And we lived like right on the White Mountain National Forest. So I would walk my dog in the White Mountain National Forest, or I would cross country ski, or I would snowshoe. And it really makes you spoiled for the outdoors. But that's one of the things that's so important is enjoying the outdoors. One of the things that my mom said when I was recovering in the hospital, as soon as my tubes were taken off and I was still in a wheelchair, but I didn't have to be hooked up on the bed for certain periods of time, she would take me in the wheelchair and bring me outside just to sit in the sun and breathe. Because if you're in the hospital for months, you really lose that outside energy. And she's actually a PhD candidate on mind body medicine with a focus on traumatic brain injury recovery. And so she's focusing in on getting the scientific data backing why did it make a difference to bring me to the outside. Because we're hoping, like you said, there's more and more of a younger generation that is open-minded and thinking about brain injury recovery a little bit differently. And we want to be getting some of these alternative complementary choices to be covered by insurance, to be recommended by the hospitals, to be told what to do. And because of how much data, statistics, numbers go into being told to do something by the hospital, you need to get the scientific backing, and then you need to get so much stuff to be able to get complementary medicine to be shared. But it is so helpful, and it doesn't take away from, in my mind, it doesn't take away from the Western medicine I received. However, if I had just only done the Western medicine I received, I would not have gone to hyperbaric chambers. I would not have focused on my nutrition, my exercise. And that was all the guidelines that my mom was having me do, because I wasn't really making decisions for myself for a year or 2 years. I was living at my mom's house. But all of that stuff allowed me to have the recovery that I did. And everyone says, your recovery is so miraculous. You're so lucky. It was miraculous and it was lucky. However, you can take so many steps to create luck in your life as well.
One of the things that I heard earlier, I'm enjoying this wonderful conversation. Thank you for all you do. Oh my goodness. One of the things that I heard early on is that brain injury recovery never ends. And I look back through the prism of time over my own life. I was able to read again at 4 years. I was probably 5 or 6 years old by the time I was capable of full-time employment again, working a 40-hour work week. These were big milestones that took years to achieve. But a lot of the things, I'm still learning. I think it was Aristotle who said at like 83 years old, I am still learning. And a couple of years ago, I was looking for things that, how can I, in my world, it's, how can I find things that improve the quality of my life? Because a rising tide lifts all ships. And if I'm doing better, it's easier for my wife. She's been through an awful lot. She was with me through it all. It's easier for my family. And the other piece that I'm absolutely passionate about is when I find things that work, I've got some rather deep reach into the brain injury community. And I'm quite transparent about sharing things that have worked, hoping it'll help others, and also sharing things that haven't worked, being just at times painfully transparent. And about 2 years ago, I looked into mindfulness. Unfamiliar with it completely, but the years of PTSD that's the, TBI for me is easier than PTSD. TBI is predictable. I know what I got. I know how to manage it. I know my limitations. There's a cruel side to PTSD, so I get into daily meditation. I use a VR headset. I do a VR app called Trip. My mornings are religiously 15 minutes of mindfulness meditation. And it's improved my outlook and the quality of my life. I said to my wife, Sarah, not too long ago, it hasn't really taken much away from the challenges that I faced with the PTSD, but she looked at me and smiled and said, yeah, but you're a calmer, kinder, nicer human being. How do you beat that? What a kind thing to hear.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of things that we can do. And I like you, I'm a big believer in the limitations. Western medicine will carry us so far, but there's so much more. And just being open to trying things that feel and seem like they make sense. And if it doesn't work, you discard it and say, okay, what am I going to try next? What's the universe going to show me?
Yes. And I actually started meditating as my mind was coming back in the hospital. My mom and sisters were like having me listen to a meditation, and it was so funny because I started doing a lot of these complementary medicine things before my mind came back. So it wasn't even anywhere close to me making the decisions to do it, but it was just something that I did. And because of my life and how I was living it before, I was used to being coached and told things to do. And it's pretty similar recovering from a brain injury to being coached. You don't always stick with the same coach. Sometimes you might think they're great, and then you might be like, well, actually, we don't see eye to eye anymore, and change. And sometimes they say things and you're like, that is perfect. And sometimes they say things and you're like, okay, how can I understand what you're trying to say? But so that's one of the big things with having a brain injury and recovering is knowing you can climb an alternative peak, knowing it will take a long time, take steps. As you pointed out, it took multiple years for you to reach these different milestones. So it will take a long time for recovery, but you can keep going. And while you're going, try different things and listen to different people. I would suggest listen to people who have some of the outcomes that you want to experience. And they might have some tips that you can incorporate in your life and be like, okay, this helps. But just always stay open to keep climbing up that journey. And when you reach the summit, acknowledging that you're at a summit and a beautiful view.
Interestingly, early on, I gravitated toward people who had time living with brain injuries. I call them TBI old timers, and one of the commonalities, one of the common threads that I saw in those that had lived this second life for a while and were content with their lives is they had the commonality of finding purpose in their pain, using the experiences that they had walked through for the betterment of humanity. And it's actually in the St. Francis prayer. It's in giving that we receive. And I saw it consistently. The other piece, I write for an organization called Brainline. I'm their longest tenured staff blogger since the organization started. I take pride in that. They
Nice.
spend 10 or 11 years in monthly articles. They're great people. They do a lot of great work. They work with wounded warriors. And you had talked about coaches. 2 or 3 editors ago, one of my editors mentioned the concept of post-traumatic growth. Never had heard of that. Everybody's heard of post-traumatic stress. And I Googled it, and there's a lot of information out there. And it's a category of people and of internal change where it's defined by trauma. Something egregious happened. The individual came out the other side of that trauma with a new sense of purpose, a new sense of direction, a new sense of being of service. And I looked around the landscape of my life and went, wow, those whose lives I'm emulating all fit into the category of post-traumatic growth. So yeah, there's kind of a blueprint that you can follow. I've got to ask you, after recovery is kind of never ending. We find new ways to do things. Did you have a shift in your personality at all, or did you emerge as the Jamie that always was? Were you different?
It's interesting because I kind of emerged as the Jamie I was as a child. And so as a child, I've always been really interested in growth. I actually was trying to go learn about and feed the homeless in Chile when we were down there. And one Christmas, when I was 11 years old, I felt so fortunate at all the opportunities I had in my life that I told my mom and dad that I wanted my Christmas presents to go to a girl in a third world country so she could have opportunity. And they were like, okay, write that on your letter to Santa. So I wrote it on my letter to Santa. And then on Christmas morning, I walked down and all my sister's stockings were bursting, and mine had one little note in it that said that I was supporting a girl's education. in a third world country. And as an 11-year-old, I was a little bit bummed that I didn't have presents, but I was really happy that I was able to give someone opportunities. So my whole life, I've wanted to give people opportunities. And when I was a child, I also was a very big performer. I loved to perform. I was an athlete, and I also did acting and performing and put on all these plays. And so then I pursued my competitive career even more and got a cool teenager and, got a little bit more focused on just winning the competitions and stuff like that. But then after my brain injury, I went back to giving people opportunities for recovery in the medical sense, in the mindset sense, in the collaboration, in the awareness. There are so many individuals who experience a traumatic brain injury, but there's so little talk and publicity about it. So the idea of being able to get back on stage and talk to people in a way that can bring tears and laughter and change their lives is like what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be as a child, but it changed into that.
I go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say because it was a little interesting because when I was a little on my professional ski career, I was trying to be somebody else and trying to be really cool. And after my brain injury, I was like, you know what? I've already experienced having to relearn how to swallow water. I've already experienced having to walk upstairs. I was in diapers when I was in my 20s. You can't really bring anything at me that's going to embarrass me anymore. So I'm just going to be me. And if you like it, that's great. And if you don't, that's great too. But I'm just going to be me. So that's a big thing that I took out of my brain injury. So my post-traumatic growth was really just letting my core decide what I did.
You just spoke in your voice what I feel. Once you've looked death in the eye and realized you've gone through something so egregious that most will never understand, bring it on. Like, because really, I know I'm not bulletproof, but I've been through so much that it's taken a lot of the fear out of life. And I, interestingly, was very shy and soft-spoken before my injury. I just didn't like the limelight. I didn't like exposure. I was painfully shy in school, and my personality shifted a little more in the other direction. But there is such a sense of freedom that comes with speaking your piece. It took me a couple of years to learn to exercise restraint to be able to do it in a way that was not offensive, because I tended to be overly verbose and opinionated early on. But, I feel, and I suspect you do too, that like I'm living the life that I was destined to live. And your concept of alternative peaks is fascinating. I didn't realize in my life before that there was a peak out there for me to climb. And my injury revealed that peak. And it took me a lot of years. I had, after I keynoted in Maine, I went, I really like helping people. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I had the opportunity to keynote literally internationally. And it was heady times, it was exciting times. There were a lot of airports, a lot of planes, a lot of nervousness, but a lot of people helped. And time passed, and I've got different advocacy work that I'm committed to now. But now that peak is behind me, what's my next peak? Because you just can't, it's not a one and done. What am I going to look at next? My wife and I started a social network a number of years ago. It's the largest in the world based on user engagement. Between her caregiver group and the group that I facilitate, 50,000 members. Last year we had 7 million user engagements. And I keep a close eye on things, kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the green curtain, and I see comments like "Me too, me too, me too" as other people share, and those are the human neurons firing with people that are having the end of their own personal isolation. Bam! Like you can't put a price on that. And so we climbed to that peak. We Started a magazine a number of years ago, Brain Injury Hope. It's a free publication in digital format. And my passion lately has been AI. AI is everywhere. I utilize it professionally. And because I'm hardwired for an advocate, I'm thinking, how do I use this to help serve the people that we serve? And there was a piece that hit the news recently about a very effective text to voice converter. So I can take stories from our magazine, and I'm in the middle of developing 200 or 300 archive stories that you can listen to, because reading is tough for some in the brain injury community. So that's the next peak, and that should be live within probably 6 weeks. Then I'll look for another one. So yeah, you know what? Very rare does a mountain stand alone. You know better than most. You've been on enough slopes. Mountains are in clusters, and you climb one or you summit one, and then you look around and say, what's next? And,
Yes.
It's exciting. It's like, you rub your hands together and go, a year ago, I never foresaw that we could use AI as a mechanism to serve the brain injury community. And the recipients, those who are able to just listen to stories, we deem it to be kind of like I'm going to show my age, like the Reader's Digest for brain injury. It's all personal stories. But there are people that are going to be able to listen and find versions of themselves and not even know that AI made it all possible. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is very exciting. And how I came up with this story was I was climbing up a mountain of life. I was like pretty high up, traveling the world, competing, and I was caught in a metaphorical avalanche that slid me down to the bottom. My brain injury, instantly, in the blink of an eye, my life dramatically changed. And then when I was at this bottom of the mountain, I could choose to climb an alternative peak, or I could choose to stay stuck at the bottom. That's the thing. It kind of sounds abrupt and a little forceful, but you have the choice. You have the choice to rebuild your life. You have the choice to climb. Even if you have permanent disabilities, permanent deficits, permanent changes that are visible. A lot of brain injury survivors have them that are invisible, but even if you have visible ones, you can harness what you currently can do and build a life and climb a beautiful mountain. And it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. You need to believe that it's possible to look out at other mountains and start to climb. And sometimes when you're climbing, you'll go through rainy patches and you'll go through the cold and you'll go through the clouds. And it will be tough and challenging, but just take one step and another step. So there will be challenges. But if you don't start to climb, you're always going to stay stuck at the bottom.
Yeah, years ago I saw something that said, be careful if you reach the summit of the mountain, because there's only one way to go when you're on top, and that's downhill. And I don't agree with that, because when you're at the summit, then you can look around and say, what's my next summit? Success is measured differently for different people. You have a large platform of folks who listen to you. I can say with absolute certainty that there are people whose lives are better because of the work that you've done. Like, that's just the way that it works. People find the end of isolation and listening to the stories of those who have the courage to share them. But on a smaller scale, not everybody's cut out for a lot of the rigors that are required to constantly give. So one of the things that I try to do also is to define success a little bit differently, not by what I've accomplished, but how I live and who I am. We've come out of a couple of really tough years. The pandemic, humanity doesn't seem to have bounced back to where it was before. My wife and I, when we're out just engaging in life with others, practice overt kindness. Kindness at every opportunity. Even if somebody's being unkind or harsh, to basically fire back with kindness. Quiet conversations with the cashier at the supermarket. I was in, my Band-Aid's gone, I go in for quarterly blood work to make sure I stay healthy. And those that are in the position of drawing blood had a really tough go of it during the pandemic. The place that I go, they had signs, do not abuse our staff, be kind to our people. People were being unkind. When I go into a scenario like that, I complimented the girl who drew my blood. And I said, you guys are rock stars, cutting edge of healthcare, and you ought to be on pedestals. and to practice that level of overt kindness. A couple extra dollars if I can for a tip at Dunkin' Donuts. These are very small, subtle shifts, but even for those that may have challenges that make mine seem minuscule, anybody can be kind. Anybody can be a good human and be part of maybe the shared solution to a lot of the ills that trouble us today. So it doesn't. Mountains are nice, but sometimes just walking through the meadows of life on a flat, easy trail, and doing it with dignity and kindness to others, that carries a lot of weight too.
I love that. It makes me think of, I was raised with a concept from my mom of be your own personal best. And when I was competing, I kind of thought of it as be your own best. But then after my brain injury, I really realized what be your own personal best meant. And sometimes being your own personal best is walking your dog. And like you said, just like enjoying walking through a meadow and just being happy and kind. You don't have to always summit a jagged, rocky peak. Sometimes you just need to live and be happy, because every person who had a brain injury sometimes has thoughts of, why did this happen to me? What's going on? Also, every single person who had a brain injury who can listen to this podcast is alive. We are alive. So the point of life is to enjoy it. So just enjoy it. It's funny that it's such a hard concept for us to get, but like really just do whatever you need to do today to enjoy the day.
One of the hold on, put my water down. Bravo, bravo. One of the things that I found, there have been a lot of joys in the journey, and I found, and I've said it to my wife regularly, that brain injury survivors are the kindest. Many of them are the kindest people I've never met, nor would I ever have met them had it not been for our circumstances. And we exist. Most of us are, you watch the news for a couple of weeks straight, you don't hear much about brain injury. We know each other in the circles that we travel in, but once we get out of these silos, we're really not known by a lot of people. And but the people that are out there that have experienced what we've experienced, for the most part, it's softened their demeanor. And they're authentically nice people who, like us, they've been through the mill. They've just been through so much. And I think in many cases, it kind of magnifies the good. It takes a lot of work, and your life is a living testament to it. I wasn't in diapers in my 20s. People that look at you now and you share their story, I know it because I live it, the jaw drops and they go, no way, that can't have been you. And when I share that, in 2011, I couldn't put more than 3 words together without stuttering or stammering or misplacing words. But here we are.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you came on to talk, because this is so fun, and I just got shivers, and I'm so excited because I'm so fortunate that I do have a platform and an ability to share these stories. Because you're right, everyone who has a brain injury feels kind of isolated. However, it's crazy how many people have had brain injuries. Acquired brain injury is the largest disability in the US, and there are so many individuals that you wouldn't even know that are walking down the street that you see that are having challenges from brain injuries, and you don't even know that they have a connection to that, because you're right, it's not talked about on the news that much. And when you look at like international news, and in Turkey there's earthquakes and all the rubble's falling down and you have to take care of everyone who broke their arms. What about everyone who got hit on the head with rocks? So that's why I'm so excited that I have a lifelong journey of raising awareness about brain injury, so we can start making the changes that people can feel like they have people to relate to, and that they aren't isolated, and that they can climb an alternative peak, and life can be beautiful after a brain injury.
Amen. I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, by the way. Not that you need the encouragement, but you're doing very good work out there.
You as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to listen to Life Gets Mo Crazy. I hope you learned some new ways to recover from struggle and climb an alternative peak by listening to this episode. If you loved it, please subscribe to the podcast and share with your family and friends. If you would like to follow me, Jamie Mo Crazy, you can find me on all social media platforms at Jamie Mo Crazy or hashtag Mo Crazy Strong. Each episode is the last Friday of every month, so go be Mo Crazy Strong until our next episode.